United we're as strong as a mountain. United we're as deep as
This attack by FigMat is going on at school districts throughout, urban school districts throughout California. And where is the CFT and CTA leadership? Where have they? Have they said anything? SEIU? So in other words, you've got a privately run agency paid for by school districts, the public, destroying school districts, and the unions, which are supposed to be representing the public school districts, are completely silent. They're acquiescing, and they're actually, colluding with the people who are destroying public education. We have to raise that in our unions. We have to get our unions to say, hell no, it should be abolished. That agency is a nonprofit that should be abolished because it's basically being used to wreck public education and attack black and brown working class schools in California. And the evidence is there. So there's an occupation going on. There's a liberation school going on. We've been talking about gentrification of housing. People should go to Parker School, elementary school, to support that occupation. We need to support a concrete action which is being taken by parents and community and trade unions who are defending that school, and for the young people who are the future, who need a community school. And joining us now is Misty Cross, who's with Moms for Housing and Housing and Gentrification.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Misty Cross, and I'm one of the co-founders of the West Oakland Moms for Housing. If you haven't heard of the Moms for Housing, that was the moms that were housing insecure that took over a house that was on Magnolia Street, and not just to take over the home, which was to bring attention around the monopoly board game that these big companies are playing with housing, and the reason why the homeless population is growing. So that is the reason why we decided to do the movement as the Moms for Housing. I wanted to tie that into what's going on with school and the privatizations that's going on with charters, and the reason why our public schools are under attack. I'm a part of SLAP, which is Schools and Labors Against Privatization, that was brought together with the unions, the school teachers, the parents, the community members, and also the ILWU Local 10. And we came about that to bring awareness around the Fisher family, the Shorenstein Foundation, and a bunch of other billionaires that play a big part into tearing down our public systems. Bringing in privatization and pushing out the working class people. And it's a big deal when the working class comes together. So we need to make sure that we stay united. Most of these unions aren't doing any good. I wouldn't join them if I was any of you guys. You know, you put your money into it and then you're fighting against them in order to get things done. So I would jump out of the unions and just really unite with the people, because the unity with the people and how we make things change, and politically, if we're talking about the Democrats not doing their jobs, we got to get these people out. And then we got to start politically educating ourselves on how to really step into these places, because we have so much information. Kitty, you spoke a lot about the FigMat, and I'm just in my mind saying, why haven't we took them down? Why haven't we pushed for an investigation on these things? Because we know that is part of a system that's built to really keep tearing down our children. This is feeding them right into the school to prison pipeline. So if we keep uniting and really like using our people power, elections are coming up in November, and really stepping on these people who are backing. Stop putting your money behind candidates that we know are part of the privatizing families. We pretty much already can see as they campaign who they're really with and who they represent, but they do not represent the working class. We are the ones that keep the things and the stuff in this city really running. The fight against the ballpark is a big thing. We need to all come together against that, because we just went through a pandemic. And why have our food chain attacked again by slowing down the port and bringing in things that does not make sense? It's in a good place right now. People can travel safely there, have drinks, and enjoy life at the Coliseum where it is now, and have safe travels. But again, we're up against a systematic machine that is really like built to really like tear us down. And the only way that we beat that machine is to really come together as a united force, and really understanding that we're no longer going to sit back and let the privatizers come in with their money and really buy out elections, close our schools down and change them, really putting our people that are black and brown predominantly in situations to where we can't survive. We're asking you guys to come out and join the Parker Liberation. Last night on Friday, we just had poetry night, which is it was a real good thing. We decided to take over that school. There was 2 moms that really did it after the promotion, and because they were fed up with the school district, just not giving them a chance to really have equity analysis, really have a year of engagement of trying to figure out how they were going to get their kids to the next school site. Instead, they put a more burden on them. So they decided, and we decided to join them and secure that building. So now Parker Elementary is now Parker Liberation School and will stay in the hands of the community, because we know that the power is within the people. And so, yeah, Solidarity Sundays is going to be going on. We open up the space for, if you guys want to have meetings there, you can utilize that space for meetings. We're just not willing to give up. We're going to be working in the communities. There's 6 more schools next year that is going to be affected by closures. We're going to be networking and outreaching in those areas to let those parents and those working class folks know that we're there for them to make sure that their kids have what they need to get through K through 8th grade. Thank you.
Thank you. Direct action speaks louder than words, and taking action to support that school. But I think we also have to get other unions and the Labor Council to support that. The labor movement should say, keep that open, support that school. So let's try to get the SEIU and our locals to say, hell yes, keep it open. Don't attack it. Keep it open. That's what I say. I mean, and that would be a big thing, because these same unions are supporting politicians who are voting to shut it down. That's what they're doing. So that's an important issue that we have to raise. So our next speaker is Tenant and Neighborhood Council's East Bay DSA, E. Connor, who's an organizer on housing and gentrification.
My pronouns are she and her, they and them. And I am an organizer and a tenant with Tenants and Neighborhood Councils. I'm in our East of Lake local. I'm also a UAW Local 2320 NOLSW member as well. And I just want to thank everybody who spoke before me. It's really incredible just to see, like, you know, not only the organizing that's happening, but sort of like the, you know, worker directed investigation and like research and writing. I think these things really create the kind of sort of social and intellectual public life that we need in order to actually start combating, you know, these conditions. Is mentioned, of course, by other people, you know, the way that labor and even school are used as a tool of social control in this system. And, you know, housing is really similar. It's used to marginalize, poison, punish people in very different ways. And one thing that we believe in our organization is that, you know, just like you have a tenant, just like you have a union at work, you know, you really deserve one at home too. And you really deserve that in your neighborhood. And building these kinds of, you know, the way that we organize in Tank is there's the whole union, which is Bay Area wide, and then there are locals. We have 3 locals in Oakland, and then these locals work with tenants in their own buildings and with other tenants of buildings owned by their same landlord to sort of really build the kind of collective power needed to push back against things like harassment, things like housing conditions. And one thing that we've doing a lot of in the last year or so is working with tenants who are in these kinds of affordable housing developments that are really a pretty like nefarious way of funneling public money into private pockets, and really doing this disservice to their tenants of, you know, not only endangering them, there's often safety problems, habitability problems, but also evicting them, even in the middle of a pandemic. And this, happens through intimidation. It happens in ways that, are totally illegal, but can be really difficult for tenants on their own to fight back. And so what we do is we're, there to support, there to share information about how we organize. We learn from each other, and we build that local power. We can help you write a letter to your landlord. We can show up, just like you would in a labor union, to picket outside of the landlord's house or like place of business. And this kind of practice, I think really creates, like, again, this sort of political social life that really is necessary to sort of build the power needed to combat like privatization and the oppression of the working class throughout like all these various systems. Another thing that we are seeing a lot of is what's called carceral housing. So just like there's a school to prison pipeline, there's, an affordable housing to prison pipeline. This, may feel like it's really distant from this conversation, but Newsom's latest sort of invention to like appease the Democratic Party that he is indeed addressing the housing problem is something called care courts. And care courts are basically these micro boutique conservatorships that take people who, are housing precarious or unhoused and funnel them into basically, institutional settings and, denying them like their agency in various ways. As a means to house them. And this is supposed to be care in this country. And I think, we see that too, even in the way that a lot of our local politicians sort of address homelessness through even the development of like these sort of, facilitated official encampments. While folks inside the encampments have pretty strict rules around who they can bring over, their curfew, their sort of daily activity. People outside of the encampments who are nearby in order to access the services that the encampments provide are often swept with like greater regularity to basically falsely give the impression that these encampments are fixing something that they're not. We've definitely talked to people in those encampments who have been kicked out for things like, having a service animal or having a partner stay over. I think like when we think about this, we feel like it's really distant from our experience, maybe as like tenants who have a landlord, live in an apartment, live with our families, live with other people. But the fact that, all of us are just this one paycheck away from probably being unhoused or really having our housing be compromised, I think we need to start thinking really seriously about how, being unhoused is looking more and more like jail in this country. And this is, the overall condition and what we're hurtling towards. And I really believe that the solution is building, mass tenant unions within the United States in city centers like we have of working class people who are, fighting against that on a really basic level. And showing that kind of support. TANK is an autonomous tenants union. It means that we are totally funded by members' dues. We do not take money from nonprofits or foundations. These kinds of apparatuses, just like the Dem Party entryism into unions and that kind of neutralization, really can compromise our organizing. And it's really important that we have independent institutions that are for the working class and that are fighting for the working class. If people are interested in, joining TANK, I would definitely encourage you all to check out a local meeting, whether or not you have a problem with your landlord. I think that sometimes we we run to the union and the resource when we need it the most. And in order for all of our organizing to be sustainable, we need to show up whether or not we're personally at need. So I'd really like to just encourage everybody to come check that out. I will go ahead and just pop a address in the chat. It's baytank.com. There's a lot of information there. If you have questions or anything, I can also put my email address in the chat as well. Always happy to talk to people about organizing with Tank and tenant organizing generally. I also just wanted to say that, we have a lot of OEA and ILWU members in our union. I think, that's even part of the reason that I'm here today is because of some of those connections. And I've just really been grateful to hear from everybody and looking forward to hearing more about how, our tenant unions and our labor unions and the coalitions of families and neighbors who are, making up what is Parker occupation and other kinds of efforts like that can do more with each other. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And this is a combined struggle, obviously, and I hope that everyone who's listening joins SLAP, becomes a member, supports it, and sets up a SLAP in your own community, your own city, because this is not just an Oakland project. It's a project for people in every community in this country. And our next speaker is Gregorio Gutierrez. And Gregorio Gutierrez is a member of SLAP. He's a member of the OEA and an activist who's been importantly involved. Welcome, Gregorio.
I appreciate it. So long story short, I'm going to be addressing, or talking, I should say, more specifically about OEA, OUSD, and basically what I would call either corporate or business union operations, right? So I want to start with my opening statements. Privatization of public resources that are designated to serve the public good is inherently theft and consistently leads to negative outcomes for the general public. The next thing that I want to say is that privatization creates unfair, inequitable circumstances which the individual cannot overcome in most cases. Also, that privatization co-opts unions to achieve their goals. And so I'm going to talk about that last part. So let's talk about co-optation. I'm going to go over some key terms real quick. So privatization literally just means that you're taking public funds or public resources and you're giving control or ownership, either control or ownership of those resources or funds to a private entity, an individual, corporation, or organization, whatever it may be. And that's according to Webster's online dictionary. So I just want to be clear on that, and that's how I'm using the word privatization. So going back to OEA, long story short, I think what happens is there's a bunch of things that happen. My degree is originally in psychology, so I want to talk about that a little bit, how it's added in there. So there's this concept called positive normative assumptions. We all make them every day. When I walk down the street, I assume that the people that I see around me are not going to attack me. That's a positive normative assumption for my circumstances. When I go to work, I assume that my coworkers are not going to attack me. That's a positive normative assumption. Well, these positive normative assumptions build the basis of our society, right? Some of them are cultural, some of them are societal in general, some of them are individual, whatever the case may be. Why does this matter? Why am I talking about this when I'm talking about unions? Because when you are a member of a union, you make positive normative assumptions about the leadership. And those assumptions are that they are competent, that they are deserving, meaning that they earned it, there's some meritocracy in place, and that they are going to fight for all of the members of the union, right? Those are all positive normative assumptions. And so what I would say, my personal opinion, just me speaking from my experiences in OEA and OUSD, this is my 5th year. The completion of this year represented my 5th year as a teacher. I actually most recently at the end of this year left OUSD and left OEA. So I want to talk about my experiences in OEA a little bit in OUSD. So the main point of what I'm trying to say is that my positive normative assumptions were violated. Now, how do I know they were violated? Because in psychology, they teach us to listen to words, that signals intent, potentially, if they're truthful, but to watch actions. Actions are how you measure somebody in terms of their character, in terms of what they're doing. If I tell you, hey, I love you, but then I physically assault you every day, someone's going to say, I don't know what's going on there, right? So why am I saying all this crazy stuff? Because what I found, in my opinion, in Oakland Education Association, a union, was that they were engaging in what I would call a business unionization or corporate unionization. What does that mean? That means, and some of this stuff sounds great. When you hear it, it sounds great because you apply your positive normative assumptions. So they'll say things like, the terms you might hear might be things like, we want harmonious labor relations. Well, that sounds great to me as a laborer. I want to have harmonious labor relations. But that doesn't mean that we go to work and we get along. What that actually means is that the people that are paying you for your labor, right, that those people want harmonious relations with their laborers, right? That's what that means. What does that mean? That means that there's going to be collaboration, which also sounds like a great thing. We should all collaborate and make OUSD better. But once again, the collaboration is directional, just like the harmonious word was directional. What does that mean? Everything is directed by, in my case, OUSD for the benefit of whatever the administration of OUSD is. That means that they want the union to collaborate with them on their plan, not the other way around. Now, why is that a problem? Because the union is one of the strongest voices that actually has an impact on what OUSD does. And we got to measure actions and not words. Or if we're going to measure words, we got to measure combined with the actions. So what do we know about OUSD? We know about OUSD is in the past 20 years, they've closed 16 schools. We know that 14 of those 16 schools have become charter schools. And we know that currently, if you go on to OUSD's website, you'll be redirected if you look to see how many charters are there, because the OUSD website, which is a public government website, will redirect you to another website that is oaklandcharter.net. And you'll find that oaklandcharter.net will tell you point blank that they have 18 charter schools operating within Oakland. Now, why does this matter? Once again, going back to the union, my assumption is that they have a basic understanding of economics. When it comes to, if we're going to speak that way, there's a limited number of students. This is in McDonald's. You don't open another McDonald's and all of a sudden the demand for hamburgers goes up because there's more McDonald's. That's not how schools work. There's a fixed number of students in the district, period, end of story. Every school that you open, charter or not, is going to be servicing a portion of that student body. So we need to understand that the union that is OEA, and unions in general, are being co-opted by whatever the powers that be, privatizers, whatever you want to call them. These are people that wish to take public resources, public funds, and put them under the control or give ownership of those things to private entities. I do want to wrap up because it's been already 5 minutes, been talking a lot, so long story short, what I want to say is you should not assume that your union is working on your behalf or on the behalf of labor. You should be checking those assumptions consistently, and you check those assumptions by understanding what are the core principles that you as an individual have, what are the core principles that union espouses or says that they have, and then looking at the action of the leadership and of the members, and are they being directed to do that? We need to understand that. So with that, I just want to wrap up and say, if you're a union member, understand that co-optation is a real thing, money matters, and your leadership can be co-opted, and you need to be actively aware of that and organizing against that if you need to. And if you yourself are a leader, understand that you need to still be aware of that and actively organizing yourself and your thoughts around not being co-opted and servicing the people that you said you was here to service. Thank you very much. That's my time.
Also, one of the supporters of SLAP and has been at the school giving classes as a teacher is Steve Johnson, and he's going to speak.
Most of the things that I was going to say have already been said by people regarding charter schools. That's my one of my areas of real issues with public education. So I'm not going to repeat those things. I don't think that's a good use of time. I'm just going to say that I would like to see more done from this conference regarding the FICMAC and fighting school closures, because our demand was that schools not be closed, and we must not give up that demand, whether we get it or not. Our demands must remain solid, and we must remain organized and get to the bottom of what's going on here with these school closures. This conference has provided a lot of information, a lot of seeds for knowledge, and I encourage everybody to come to Parker tomorrow evening. We have Solidarity Sunday. Hold on. What time is it? What time?
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
12:30 is a political discussion. 1:30 to is Narcan and then cop watch from 2:30 to 5.
12:30 on. Come on up, and let's talk and stay busy. We're really making history here. This conference is making history. We're making history at Parker, and this is what we need to be doing to model around the country and around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
So because, obviously the goal of this is not just to, impart all this, quality information and all these, very, apt and profound talking points. We want to make sure that we have something, where we're walking out of here or, hopping off Zoom around some kind of action. So there's a list of proposals that have been, listed out on the overall agenda of our little event here today. Action proposals. So we want to make sure that, we get an understanding of what people are motivated to do around these proposals. Let me, first, maybe we should just start, and I'll just read out the first one, and then we'll have, maybe the best way to deal with it is to, say, for those of you who would like to speak in favor of certain action, come up. But again, we don't want to be here all afternoon. That is the point. Okay? So this is a long list of proposals. A lot of them, just looking at them, a lot of them are, kind of geared toward more, electoral work. There are, calls for some strike action, rallies and whatnot. So I don't know, what's going to be the best use of our time from now until, what are we at? We are at 3. Most of us said... we're good time-wise. Okay, for sure. So let me read the list over, especially for those of us who are on Zoom who may not have gotten the list. So first action proposal is organizing for strike action against school closures and class cuts. United Labor Community Actions to stop school closures as well as layoffs of faculty and staff. That would be 1. 2, statewide labor action rally in Sacramento. 3, organizing to get other unions to oppose privatization and repeal position of Alameda Labor Council, which is currently in support of giving Howard Terminal to John Fisher and the A's. The next one, support local and state charter amendments against outsourcing public jobs. Next, the California constitutional amendment banning privatization of public services and jobs. The next one would be to target politicians' offices and homes to put forward our demands. Those identified in this list include Nancy Skinner, Phil Ting, Tony Thurman. Obviously, there are others. Next one is the campaign for a tax on the Port of Oakland containers, so that money can go to Oakland schools and other public services in Oakland. There is one to campaign to abolish FCMAT and eliminate legislation and agencies attacking public education. Next one is to organize SLAP committees in other areas. The next one, an education conference every 6 months or regular education panels. And the last one is a campaign around union organizing and rights for charter school teachers, or should we instead call for charter schools to be eliminated? That is the current list of action proposals. I don't want to limit you to those, so if anybody has other ideas for action, obviously, right now we want to see people in the audience, both on Zoom and in person, to come up and speak to whichever one of these proposals you are most in support of.
Or rather calling for a plebiscite, a vote, on Howard Terminal. These people, Tony, he hides behind his office, and the FCMAT policy is implemented in Oakland. While they are in the fight for their lives politically, we should have a campaign that says they abstain from us, we abstain from them, and call on them to meet, and threaten their campaign with defeat. Right now we're not in a place to elect anybody, but like Marco Amaral ran, across the state. He got over 500,000 votes on support for a community schools program. We can cite that. In Alameda County, it was over 10%. In San Francisco County, it was over 15%. That's the difference that can defeat these people. And they are worried about their November performance. So a campaign to force them to the table around funding Oakland schools right now as a way to remove our threat. And not close the schools that have been closed.
Okay, we were hoping to have people get together and organize proposals and speak from the floor for them, and we've had our first one, and I'm giving the second on behalf of the very first one listed, Organizing for Strike Action. Now, so what has to be done? Like I'm here to say, it's time to organize for strike action because in my opinion, that's the only thing that we can do that could be effective. What's the model for that? Let's remember the Red for Ed national strike wave before the pandemic. If they can do it in West Virginia, we can do it in California. In West Virginia, the strikers mobilized parents, students, the other unions, and even some principals behind them for a completely illegal strike against Virginia state law that their union leaders did their very best to prevent and failed. The rank and file ran right over them. Here in California, the LA and Oakland teachers' strikes, at the time they were saying for both strikes, we can't make any concessions, there's absolutely no money. Well, they went on strike anyway, and sure enough, they got those concessions that allegedly there was no money for. Now, as you've heard already, in the opinion of many people, the Oakland teachers could have gotten a hell of a lot more. The strike was sold out. I've heard similar things about the LA strike. But in any case, those strikes proved that militant action can win concrete gains. Despite claims there's no money, which right now is looking pretty absurd with the California budget surplus. The California GNP is larger than Great Britain's, so it's always possible for money to be found for our demands if we fight for them hard enough. Well, while cutbacks and school closings ravage education in California, things have been happening. Starting with Striketober last fall, there's been nationwide wave of strikes and union organizing at Starbucks, at Amazon, even I hear recently at a Trader Joe's. Here in California, the UC lecturers got some serious concessions by threatening to go on strike last fall, and we've already heard about the story with the Oakland teachers, with the strike on the 29th. At the Bay Area community colleges, CCSF, Peralta, and Skyline 2, union contracts have just run out of every possibility for joint strike action this fall, maybe on a statewide basis, because that's also true for about half the community colleges in California. We should have no difficulty in enlisting support for the students in the broader community. The ongoing downsizing of the community colleges, of which CCSF is only the extreme example, is just the extreme case that affects everyone. The faculty, the students, their parents, and blue and white collar workers at the colleges have every reason to fight back against what is happening. Meanwhile, in the ports, and here I want to say a few things that Brother Trent knows 10 times better than I do, and so do, I think, every longshore and warehouse worker who's sitting in this room or listening on this, but the rest of you may not know, which is this. If ILWU, whose contract I believe is also run out, if they go on strike, that would paralyze the American economy, bring it to a crashing halt, at least on the West Coast, probably nationwide. Not only that, if it's a serious strike, striking everything, that would put a halt to the U.S. war drive against Russia. There'd be no more guns for Ukraine. And so what that means, and this has to be taken seriously, and I'm sure Brother Trent knows this really well, that if the ILW goes on strike, it's up against the whole force of the U.S. government. Like 10 years ago, Occupy, the Longview strike, Obama mobilized the Coast Guard against that strike. So it's a serious business, and I'm not in the business of giving longshore and warehouse workers, they know better what to do than I do, but it's a serious business. And for them to go on strike, I'm sure they're going to go on strike for more than just for $2 more an hour, because they'll have to be able to do just like was done in Red for Ed, to bring up demands that everyone can mobilize behind, that people in the streets can mobilize behind, like in 2020, and that and like the vast support that the teacher strikes got during the Red for Ed strikes. And talk about a general strike, maybe that's what's really needed. And so, in general, the last thing I want to say is, what do we generally need to fight back? The labor officials in all unions, especially our faculty unions, always rely on lobbying the politicians. Here we are in the bluest of blue states, and even now, last I checked, they still spend more money on prisons and education. Why is that? Because from the standpoint of the Democratic Party, money for education is something they put forward to get a few votes, whereas money for prisons and cops is what they really care about, to keep the people in line. The prime necessity is to break from the Democratic Party, and the labor movement needs programs to address the needs of everyone. We need a workers' party, an alliance with all oppressed minorities seeking fundamental social transformation. What the corona catastrophe reveals is as long as we're under a social system in which nothing gets produced unless somebody makes a buck off of it, anything in the public sector, like education or health, is a sideshow. What America really needs is a revolution. But meanwhile, let's get organized for strike action, and that means overturning union leaders who stand in the way.
First of all, I want to say that I think it's really important for people to understand how difficult it is to organize a strike, that if you can't bring 10 people to a meeting, you shouldn't be calling for a strike quite yet. Okay, second of all, I think when it comes to the schools, it's really crucial to have parent participation, or else you're going to deal with the backlash that will come from closing down schools and parents not having any place to send their kids. I also want to advocate for us creating SLAP caucuses within our unions, and that SLAP caucuses could be organized to fight for issues of democracy within the union and to fight for the change of union leadership that will advocate strongly against privatization. So that's my suggestion, that we, as SLAP, figure out a way to create SLAP caucuses within all our different individual unions.
Trent Willis, proud member of SLAP and the ILWU. I don't know if everybody is going to like what I have to say, but here, I got it, Steve. Thank you. But it's something that has to be said, and it has to do with what I personally feel like is jumping the gun. Okay, any organization in our history that has been successful in organizing people has had a foundational platform. For example, the Black Panthers started out with 10 guiding principles. The ILWU started out with 10 guiding principles and then went from there. Then those organizations started to organize people to join their organization. We have a lot of great ideas here today, but until the grassroots organizing is done, we're not going to be able to put these ideas into place. We have to get people to join SLAP. How do you get people to join SLAP? Well, you got to have a platform. Okay, now I know that some of my brothers and sisters and comrades have heard me say this on different, we've had different SLAP organizing meetings and things like that where I keep pressing the same issue. Start from the ground up with guiding principles and a publication that we would put out to explain our position and explain our guidelines and explain how we are in a better position as an organization to represent workers and give them an alternative to what they have to deal with now. Now, I'm not against organizing within our unions because during our first SLAP meeting, I advocated strongly that we organize within unions as a political party to change the makeup of leaderships of these unions. Okay, that's going to take some time. I also advocated that we organize as a political party, quote, political party, to change the outcomes of some of these elections meaning city and county, statewide elections. But in order to do all of that, we have to have membership. The ILWU didn't start with just 10 people in a room that made all of these plans and then they just magically came true. The initial organizers of the ILWU recruited. They recruited dock workers who listened to what the founders of the ILWU had to say and chose that as an alternative to what was going on at the time. We need to organize in the same way. So to wrap this up, what I'm talking about is organizing for registration into SLAP and having a informational publication that goes out periodically to those members and providing incentive for those members to bring in other members, okay? And once we get to a position of power, which is after we have organized these brothers and sisters and these comrades and these fellow workers that are automatically in the same fight we're in, then we can start to organize events that call for mass actions. Now, I heard one person comment about the Juneteenth, I believe it was Juneteenth 2020, where we had a very successful event at the port. Okay, that was organized, started at the ILW Local 10, but the ILWU gave the Juneteenth committee a platform and a ready-made workforce to start with. Okay, SLAP is pretty much starting from scratch. And we need to realize that and make sure our foundation is built in a way where we have long-lasting success and we're able to put forth these ideas that we are talking about today. So basically, I'm talking about starting from the beginning. A lot of people don't like to start from the beginning. It's a scary place to start. It's a lonely place to start. I'm looking at my comrades in this room. But one thing I have to say as far as encouragement-wise is that this is the same way the Black Panthers started. This is the same way the ILWU started. And we all know, and that's just two organizations that I'm mentioning, that we all know how those organizations ended up being powerhouse organizations and in a position to make crucial change for poor people. So that's my idea of what I think we need to do from the outset. Thank you.
From one of the attendees, Bob Mandel, support adult school teachers against union busting, demand the district sign a contract meeting the union's demands and rescind the punitive transfers of 1/3 of the ESL teachers. And then another one by Brother Henry Hitz, convince Noel Gallo to run for mayor. August 12th is the filing deadline. A vote for Noel would be a vote against Howard Terminal billionaire land grab. Okay, so I'm gonna allow Bill and Henry, who are in the stack here, to go, but first we're gonna hear from Divya Farias, who is in person.
Hear me? I don't want to repeat what Millie and Trent said, though I was gonna say something similar, but I think what I wanna say is go back to April 29th for a moment and look at specifically what did we do and what was effective there that we are going to have to scale up massively in order to work towards this idea of a general strike, the idea of significant cross-union work stoppages to protest privatization, right? The idea of like mass labor action. So first of all, the idea to do a port shutdown and a school shutdown on April 29th was proposed at a SLAP meeting. There was about 100 people there. Why were there 100 people there? I think one important reason was because a number of us had been doing serious contact work within the OEA. So we were able to reach out to people at different school sites. We've built up networks that need to continue to expand, but we've built up networks of, I know teachers at many different schools, right? And so I called those people and was like, can you please come to this meeting? We also had developed, I would say, a significant network because of the COVID organizing that we had been doing in OUSD. And so we had a number of parents that we were already connected to. So those are just some examples of why I think that there was such a significant attendance. There had also been town halls. Tim Killings, who's also part of SLAP, had done a lot of work to organize town halls at different school sites, and that was a way to get folks to come out, right? So we went to the school sites that were being closed, and then a lot of those parents and teachers came to that SLAP meeting. So April 29th was proposed, but what had to happen next? In order for the teachers union to go on strike, and just to paint a picture for you, before the April 29th proposal, we had discussed a proposal within the teachers union to do a rolling strike. And that idea was partly because, well, no one had prepared for a strike. We had just found out that the schools were going to be closed. We didn't feel like teachers really got it to just go out on strike indefinitely. And so the idea would be that we would rotate with different schools in different parts of the city. That proposal, although it was supported by, I think, over 90% of the reps that were present at a representative council, was smashed. It was destroyed. And the reason is because the leadership didn't really want to do that. I would say that was a major reason why. Another reason is because our roots weren't deep enough, right? So the proposal wasn't broadly enough supported by people who were, ready to go to bat for that idea of going on strike. So it was able to get watered down, and it got convoluted, and essentially the leadership didn't put out to a membership vote to have a strike vote, right? So April 29th was coming after that, after we had already sort of failed. How were we able to have a membership vote in the OEA to do a one-day strike on April 29th? That was extremely difficult too, for a number of reasons. First of all, because of the drama between the Alameda Labor Council and the ILWU, right? So the OEA is a member of the ILWU, but the Alameda Labor Council is in support of the Howard Terminal Stadium project. So there was politics within the OEA about we don't really want to partner with the longshoremen and go out that day. And additionally, I don't know what conversations were had with CTA, but as many speakers have pointed out today, the CTA is not oriented against privatization, right? So this sort of pro-community demand of a strike against school closures, not a strike against a contract fight, that's pretty radical. And that's not something that the union leadership is going to be quick to get behind, right? So how did we get them behind it? I want to point out two really important things. One is that we had parents come to the executive board meeting, right? And how do we know those parents? Because of all those meetings I just talked about, all that serious, diligent contact work we did at school sites to get parents and to really know them. They came to the executive board meeting and they lit them up, right? They said, you guys, we went out for you, we supported you in the strike of 2019. Sorry, I think I'm going on a little long, so I'll try to wrap it up. So that was really important. That was hugely what pushed the executive board to say, okay, fine, we will issue a membership vote. We also did a ton of organizing as best we could on an extremely short timeline. The strike was organized in less than a month. That's crazy. But within that timeline, we still were able to push those networks to get people to turn out a strong vote. We had to get a 75% yes vote to actually do a one-day strike, right? So that happened as well. And then also, I think I'll just speak from my own experience. Although I'm interested in a rank and file-list strategy to push on the union leadership, I understand that I need to maintain a working relationship with the union leadership, because if they're completely against a strike, we're not going to be able to go on strike, right? So for me personally, being able to call the president and try to push him from my vantage point, and then try to get these parents to come into the meeting and push them. That was really important to have those relationships. So I just want to emphasize that relationship building was crucial to making it happen. And then even towards the day of the strike, there continued to be tension between, should we have a joint rally with the ILWU against privatization? No, the OEA instead will have a picnic at Lake Merritt. So we had to figure out how are we going to get the membership to now march from this picnic at Lake Merritt to this militant rally against privatization at Oscar Grant Plaza, right? So again, that depended on maneuvering these relationships with the union leadership, and at least can we say on the mic, everybody, we're going to march downtown. How do we mobilize 1,000 people very quickly when the messaging hasn't really not been that strong. So I just wanted to share some of those lessons, and I think what that says for me is that moving forward, it's like Millie said, we have to be, it's not just tokenistically involving parents, it's really involving them in a deep way. It's getting student demands really as part of our platform, getting students involved in SLAP, and really on a minute level, everybody at every workplace needs to be developing contacts. If you're a teacher, it's your next door neighbor that you're talking to about SLAP. If you're a professor, it's the people in your department, right? It's like whoever's working on your floor needs to know about what's happening with SLAP, and it's building those one-on-one relationships that's gonna get us to fill this room. And that's what we need to do as a preliminary step. Thanks.
In the morning, and mentioned that I was a delegate to the Central Labor Council, and I want people to know that there was a fight within the Central Labor Council, albeit those of us in the minority obviously didn't prevail, and we haven't given up on that fight. I know that's not the main way of altering the situation. It has to be done at the grassroots, but I just wanted people to know. I do think that there are a number of things concrete things that we can take up sooner rather than later. I'm not against propagandizing about a general strike, but to be clear, as Millie said, that's not something that will be immediately on the agenda unless there is some traumatic alteration of balance of class forces. But I think there are campaigns that we can wage that will not only pressure the bureaucrats, but gain popular support. So, for example, it was mentioned that we want to abolish FICMAT. In order to abolish FICMAT, we have to overturn the legislation, AB 1200, which established FICMAT. And by the way, it wasn't originally aimed at Oakland. It was originally aimed at Richmond. And the OEA went on record calling for a statewide strike in opposition to the attack on the Richmond teachers. And we need, not to get caught up so much in electoralism, but to continually point out that these things can be reversed, these things are not set in stone. And I would say the other thing, even though it may seem not a pressing issue right now, is to make the capitalists, to make the corporate forces and the individual billionaires pay for not just changes in developing a better public education system, but when we're talking about privatization, we're talking about all sorts of public services that shouldn't come begging. And we need to continually demand that there be massive redistribution of wealth. There is going to be at least a modest proposal on the ballot in November in terms of greater taxation of the rich. Good, not adequate, but a starting place. And we have to say that they cannot, as they have been gaining billions and billions of dollars through the suffering during the pandemic, that they have to be made to pay. So I think those are just two possible starting points to try to build not only within our unions, but within the community. Thanks.
Yeah, hi. I just got this idea after the vote last week. I know that Noel Gallo has voted badly on some issues, charter schools in particular. My experience with him when I was the ED of Oakland Parents Together, he was the one ally that prevented the closure of 5 child development centers in Oakland. As far as I know, one of the very few times that people, we had called a people's occupation of the child care centers, that we actually stopped a school closure. And he was on the right side of that. He's on the right side, and the only one, except for Carol Fife on the city council, was on the right side of the Howard Terminal case. We have until October 12th. I haven't talked to Noel. I have no idea whether he's at all interested, but it could be an opportunity to, if he was willing to run, he could win. He's well known. He's been on the school board for a long time and on the city council for a long time. And it could be like a plebiscite or like a vote on Howard Terminal. We would encourage everybody, because none of the other candidates, zilch, have come out against the Howard Terminal development. So I don't know. I mean, it just seems like we at least ought to ask him and explore this possibility, and I intend to do that. Thanks.
I just want to piggyback on what people have said earlier. One was Trent saying that we need to have a vision of what we want. Jack Gerson earlier today said the same thing, that a lot of what we talk about is no cuts, but if there are no cuts, we still go back to where we were previously, and previously we were often in a very rotten situation. So we want a vision of something much better, and it's a way to organize people. I would hope that people would look over the proposed demands that we put forward. They mainly pertain to education. These were put forward by those of us who helped to organize this, and I would like to think that maybe we could agree with all these things today as part of a vision of what we want. Now, it doesn't cover all the issues. Like I said, it's mainly for education. So I just thought I could read off each one if you don't have it, but the first one is what I was just talking about, stop cuts and school closings. Is anyone here opposed to something like that? I would like to think that everyone favors that as part of our vision, but they go beyond that. The next is stop privatization, outsourcing of education and public services. The next is free higher education and fully fund public education that students and teachers need, paid for by the capitalist class. You can substitute billionaires. The fourth is worker, teacher, student, and community control of education. So that is a vision that those who are being educated, those who are involved, have a vision of what kind of education that they would want taking place. So that's like an alternative vision as opposed to going back to the previous status quo. And then last is support the liberation of Parker Elementary School, which is one of the actions of SLAP. So I'd almost like to ask right now, is anybody opposed to these things being put forward out of this conference as a picture of what we want? Again, there's many other things that could be added, but that's, as Trent was saying, and I think he's right, that you want to organize people around what you want. And it's not just to organize people to strike, but you want to organize them around an alternative vision. So I don't know, something like a vote or discussion on these demands could be put forward, and certainly there's others that could be added. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, is there any objection here? I mean, I think those are demands that I think we're all supportive of, and our general demands. We can take up a vote here. So there's a proposal. We accept these 4 demands from this conference, and they're along the lines of SLAP's principles anyway, actually. So all those in favor of these demands? Opposed? The other thing I wanted to add is in San Francisco, we're taking up a fight against systemic racism in the city and county of San Francisco with the brother Camarti. And the Department of Public Health has been discriminating against black orderlies, other workers at General Hospital. So on top of that, the Department of Public Health has refused to help protect the people of Hunters Point and Bayview. And there was a grand jury report said that basically the Department of Public Health is not protecting people who are being contaminated by the radioactive dump and the other materials. Okay. So one of the things we're proposing is having a rally at the Department of Public Health to unite the struggle against systemic racism with the struggle to defend the residents of Hunters Point, Bayview. And I think that would be could be a SLAP event towards developing something in San Francisco around SLAP. The last thing is there are unions here that could endorse SLAP and should endorse SLAP. So if unions here or COPE committees or whatever agree with the principles of SLAP, let's try to get an endorsement and then have presentations at their meetings about what SLAP is. We have to bring forward the idea of what this is in order to win more and more support. And I think sooner, I think we have a formula, or we have a plan, we have a program that can show it's a united front against privatization that includes all working people, all communities. So if we get endorsements from unions here, that would be a good way of building support and concrete support for SLAP and building it as an organization.
Okay, so we're going to hear from one last Zoom participant, Jack Gerson, and then we're going to wrap up as we have already been, here. Been a long day, and we've had a lot of good ideas, and we don't want to, occupy too much more of our time. So, Jack, with one last comment, and then we'll wrap up.
What I had said earlier about the need to fight forward, to have a vision of what we're fighting for. And I think that it's great that we all voted for that. It would have been good to have it done a little earlier so we could have more discussion on it. But hopefully we can continue to flesh that out, because it's more than just simply saying we need a vision. It would be, OEA has a vision, in fact, which a few of us here, myself and Bob Mandel, Craig Gordon, who isn't here, originally drafted. And it would be great to take that vision off the shelf and actually use it aggressively. And also to have a framing demand or set of demands. For example, the civil rights movement, Freedom Now. That was extremely powerful and summarized much more than could be said in thousands of words. In the March 4th, 2009, 2010 movement for public education, K-12 through university in California, it was no cuts, no fees, education must be free, was kind of a framing demand. And what we in OEA raised in 2007 to 2011, and others have raised elsewhere, is quality public education is a civil right, which possibly we should say it's quality education and quality housing and other services are human rights. Something like that. I think it's important to have something which we can come to an agreement on and frame as an overall vision, and then fight, under that. And to put forward what that vision is. Of course, people then always are coming in at this meeting, or one or two people, to say, well, it's important that we understand we have to fight on more minimal things. Well, of course, but we want to fight in a framework where we're fighting for the big picture. And of course, we understand that we have to, fight smaller battles along the way. That's really all that I have to say.